Welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters. And picture this, 17 years old, just outside New York City, looking at the world with more questions than answers, and finding the military on the bottom shelf, literally. For David Zallo, joining the Army wasn't about family, legacy, or duty. It was about following a curiosity that most around him didn't understand. Fast forward through a practice marriage, years as the classic needs of the Army guy, and more deployments than he probably cares to count. David found himself grinding through roles he never wanted, stuck in traffic, listening to voices that planted a seed. What the hell do I actually want for my life after this uniform? Now, after nearly 3 decades in, David's rewriting his story as an aspiring financial planner, chasing a different way to serve, one built on helping veterans tackle the real world, not just survive it. For him, this is about providing, about honesty, and about never pretending the ride hasn't left scars. This one's for you if you've ever wondered what happens when the mission changes and everything familiar drops out beneath your feet. Whether you're knee-deep in transition or just thinking about what's next, David's story is proof that you're not the only one piecing it all together. So let's get into it. David, brother, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Adam. Great to be here. Great to have this opportunity.
Yeah, man. Been looking forward to this one for a long time, particularly on the heels of actually getting to meet in person this weekend, which was super awesome of you to drive over to Clearwater, have coffee for an hour, and just shoot the shit about anything and everything and nothing.
Yeah, now we're LinkedIn official.
Yeah, that's it, right? Dude, first question for everybody that comes on, man, is where did you grow up and what inspired you to join? And I think your story is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of highlighted it. And I'll say for anybody who listens from New York, I'm from Westchester County. So if you're from Long Island, you say it's upstate New York. Anybody in the boroughs names their borough. So we are Westchester County right out. It's a suburb of New York City. And I would say, the schools are pretty good. The jobs are pretty well. A lot of people commute to the city. So it was literally nothing more than sheer curiosity as I was 16, turning 17, 11th to 12th grade, as everybody's doing that college search. It was like, well, there's something more. And part of me, I don't think my parents will watch the podcast, but, part of me thought, well, we live on the other side of the tracks, and college is expensive. So how do we afford college? And do I want to put that burden on my parents? So once you start thinking that way, there's only so many options.
Right. So it was a bottom shelf decision for you. What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as I started looking, there was I think we called it a library or like a resource room for juniors and seniors, where you can kind of do your college prep. So I recall like SAT prep books and ACT. It wasn't as big in New York, but then all the colleges, every college you could ever imagine, SUNY, CUNY, things in New York, things across the country. And I was like, well, damn, where do you learn more about the Army or the military? Because initially I was set on the Marines. And no shit, like the bottom shelf, there was like some dusty ROTC book and like, this is the Army. And I don't even think it filled up the entire shelf. And
of course not.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I should have gone back and followed up like, through my journey in high school, at least, because then I learned about the ASVAB and, hey, you got to take that. So we actually, having that conversation with our principal and superintendent, like, why don't we offer the ASVAB for students? And it was like, what? And some of them were veterans themselves. So we actually got the ASVAB into the school for a couple of years. I don't know if it still sustains now, but easier access and just more attention to it. But yeah, it was the bottom shelf. It was nice enough that they kept them there, but yeah, it was definitely not anything that most people were grabbing.
It's funny because we didn't have, to my knowledge, we didn't have the ASVAB in school either. I distinctly remember being locked in the Louisville MEPS in a room by myself, taking the ASVAB with one of the old clunky computers, the monitors that are 3 feet wide and all of that. There was 5 buttons on the keyboard, A, B, C, D, enter. That was it. That was all the keys. And I just remember sitting there and just being so impatient that probably my score was affected by it, I'm sure, because I just wanted out of that room. It's like the last thing you do after you've run through all the physical evaluations, you've talked to all the asshole doctors, you're getting ready to go pick your job and sign your thing, but they need to know what your score is. So it's like the end of a long day. And I was just like, man, this would have been way better if I could have gotten out of class to take this or something.
And that was really the thought. It's like, if you make it easier for people, they're more likely to at least pursue it. And that's not necessarily the group that you want in the military. But there are a handful of people that didn't have any other options, and just presenting it to them and going, "Hey, go through this door at 3 o'clock, sit down for however long the ASVAB takes, and see where it can open doors for the rest of your life that you wouldn't have otherwise known about."
Yeah, 100%. So you find the ROTC books on the bottom shelf, dust them off. You're intrigued. Now I want to be in the Army. So where did you go from there? Like, how did you figure out? Okay, it's time to go join. Was it straight to the recruiter's office? And because you ended up going, you're a West Point guy, right?
No, ROTC.
No, just ROTC. So what college
Yeah,
did you end
stayed
up
at the
in?
campus. Beautiful campus, but no regrets. ROTC.
Yeah. So why officer?
Well, I'll start with the first portion. Why enlisted first? Because I mean, like I said, it was everybody was going to college.
Yeah.
I was like, well, college seems boring, and I'm a November birthday, so I was younger. So I was 16 when I started the journey. Yeah, just I had a car, and all the there was at least one place was cross county in New York, and there was like 3 or 4 different recruiters' offices right next to each other, and I was set on the Marines. I'd go talk to them, and they're an easy sell, right? Like, hey, we have the cool uniform, the few, the proud. They speak right to your ego. And I was all in, but I couldn't sign the paperwork at 16. So, and even at 17, I would have to get my parents to, whatever that waiver or
Yeah.
something.
I had the same
So I knew
waiver.
that going in. Yeah, so I had no choice but to wait. And, I guess by nature, I couldn't just sit on my hands. So I was like, well, I'll at least go check out the Army. They're right next door. You know how they kind of peek out the
Oh
window and
yeah.
like, hey, come
Yep.
in here, see what we've got.
Yep.
Yeah, and then my dad, I kind of made a deal with him that I would just talk to everybody. He was in the Army for a couple of years during Vietnam, never actually went to Vietnam, but was drafted. And, I just remember we talked about the Air Force. He was like, I don't know, but they always had like real like glass plates and silverware. So the Air Force was the way to live. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, it's not really what I want, because I'm still set on the Marines. But as I was talking through like the job selection, promotion rates, and assignment locations, I was like, well, the Army really did have a lot more, I guess, options
Hmm.
and guarantees. I use that term loosely for everybody who's been in the Army, right? Like you're always needs in the Army, and they could switch, but you could pretty much pinpoint your MOS and where you were going to go thereafter, or where you could be assigned. So when the time came, I was like, well, Army seems like the best compromise of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And they had, at the time it was 98. So they had college bonuses, college money, and I signed up as a fueler for 3 years. So, I mean, I was in and out before I was even 21 and before 9/11. But I knew about the officer path going in,
Hmm.
and just, hey, I can go to college and do that. That was like, that's easy. And then I met a couple lieutenants while at Fort Hood. I was like, they're assholes. Like I can do what you do, and you're 4 years older than me. You've got a college degree. And I probably should have respected them a little bit more in hindsight for what they committed to being commissioned officers. But that kind of put it on me that okay, I'll do these 3 years, and then I'm at least gonna give another few years to this officer thing because I think I could be better than what I was exposed to. And then you start to see I have somewhere around this house, I have one of my first LESs. It was like $389 for two
Yep.
weeks. And
Yeah.
and somehow I lived. And even my last 3 years enlisted, I saved $10,000. I knew I was getting out, and I wanted to drive it around the country. So I left Fort Hood, went up to California, or out to California, up and back to New York. So I knew there was a pay difference too. So yeah, as soon as I knew that I was getting out, I applied to colleges, and I looked at colleges in New York that also offered ROTC programs, and just kind of slid my way into that in the reserves in a city college. And then 9/11 happened and kind of turned everything on its side. But I would say for the most part, didn't change anything. The reserve unit that I was in, they got a little nervous about deployments and readiness, and they started to pay attention to people's height, weight a little bit more, and who was showing up to drill. Um, but we just did the standard annual training, prepare to mobilize, and that never happened. And then I commissioned in 2004.
I knew there was something different about you. I think the best officers are the ones who do both sides, who start enlisted and then jump ship to the other side. It's just my professional experience with all the officers I ever worked with in my career. The West Point guys are the worst. They're absolute worst. They think they know everything. Then you get the regular ROTC guys. They're a little bit more humble, but the enlisted, particularly the ones who make it to like E6 or E7 and then go get a commission, those were far and away the best ones because they understand both sides of it. And so mad respect for you for doing that. Did you stay in, the 92 Fox field there after you commissioned, or what did you end up,
No.
Did you see that as an opportunity? Like, I'm done being a fueler. I want to go and try something else as an officer.
I mean, I'll say I had a pretty charmed life as a fueler, and even enlisted, I was originally at Fort Hood, it's gotten quite the reputation since. When I was there, both 4ID and First Cav were there. And I think I was originally assigned to 17 Cav. But I showed up and I went to the aviation brigade, like the HHC aviation brigade. And, anybody who knows anything about aviation, like if you're going to be in the Army and you're going to be kind of conventional and you go aviation, like that's a different life also, right? Crew rest. And, it's just a different, not saying better or worse, just different.
Definitely better.
So I was
definitely better.
Yeah,
I'll say it
probably
for you.
better. Probably better. But that was my experience on the enlisted side was kind of, but I didn't fully appreciate pilots, in the aircraft that we actually had. But no, post 9/11, I was like, well, damn, I could see a deployment on the horizon, and I don't have anything. I don't have any pride getting in the way of saying like I didn't want to be like the tip of the spear. So infantry was never like I've got to be that guy or gal nowadays. But I was like tanks. I could do tanks. And I think I put that number one. Armor was my first choice, and then I put artillery second. And Army got me for artillery, which was fine because my thought was just if we're going to deploy, I want to be in a position to actually make a difference. Right? Like you're in the Army. Now they're like where we have an active situation, conflict, war, whatever you want to call it. Like if I'm going to do it, I want to do it. And some would say, well, you should have gone infantry, but yeah, I guess I recognize my own limitations.
Right. Well, I mean, there's something to be said. Like, artillery, that's a game changer on a battlefield, right? Like that. I mean, I love you guys. As an infantry guy, like, please rain down those shells because that takes care of a lot of our problems.
It is the king of battle for a reason. That's for sure.
Compliments the queen, right?
Yes.
I love it, man. So you would spend the next 21 years as an officer. Did you know once you commissioned? I know you said you wanted to try it for a few years and see if you would make a difference a little bit ago, but what kept you doing it? What kept you doing it for 21 years? That's a long time, man.
Yeah. I think I was really having fun. Like, and once I went to Iraq, so I got up to Fort Drum after commissioning in 05. You had like a couple months to meet the team, and then we deployed. And once I went to Iraq, for some reason in my brain, I was like, well, I've seen Iraq. Eventually, I want to see Afghanistan. So like maybe I could just. And the deployments were so much that I was like, surely that'll be like 3 years, and I'll just be able to get out and I'll ride off into the sunset. But as my luck would have it, before we even got back from the first deployment to Iraq, we knew we were going back.
Same situation for me. I was
Yeah.
on the parade field coming home from the first one, and they're handing us orders for the second one, at like dates and all.
There's a JRTC rotation in there, and you're like, son of a bitch, like, okay,
Yeah.
like, and then you get stop loss, like you can't even go to schools, you might get promoted, you might get this, that, and the other, so it was like, okay, well, whatever, and that's kind of, I guess at that point, I was not married. My second deployment is when that happened, but that was one of those 15-month rotations up to northern Iraq, Kirkuk. So I got the MIT team. I got that experience. I was like, cool, like I'm getting all these things that I'm hearing about, but still hadn't been to Afghanistan. And then once we got back from Iraq, I was going to the career course back at Fort Sill, and the way they were doing assignments there was the OML, order of merit was based on dwell time. And I was like, well, shit, we just got back, so my dwell time is next to nothing. So I saw that as an opportunity. Now I can go out to Colorado, Fort Carson, because I've always heard about Fort Carson, at least as long as I was in the Army. Hey, you go to Colorado, Carson's incredible.
I
Well,
heard
shit,
that
why
too
not?
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're right. Now, people
I
don't go
never
to
made
Fort
it to
Carson.
Carson, so I don't know, but I've
Well,
heard great things about it.
it's a great location, and it's a great unit but most of the people are not there for the unit, outside of maybe 10th SF group. 4ID, it's a good unit. I forgot what they called it. It's like this digital transformation unit leading the charge. But people go to Carson for Colorado. It's not, you don't have the 82nd Pride or 101st, like the camaraderie and the legacy. 4ID's got a great legacy, but it seems to fall flat on the people that are there. Um, and I thought Fort Carson, like at that point, I was like, okay, I'll do Carson, I'll get out. And all of a sudden, the Army threw another curve, and they were like, well, this heavy brigade's going to be light, and you're going to Afghanistan.
Oh, great.
So,
Oh, you
okay,
got your
well, I
wish.
guess, yeah, yeah. And then, okay, God listened to that prayer somehow. Um, and then when we got back from Afghanistan, that's when I started looking at the functional areas. Information operations was one of them. It was just a change of pace because I was doing targeting, and probably a mix of lethal and non-lethal. And I saw IO as really the non-lethal aspect of targeting. And I thought, this if we could do more non-lethal, we could do less lethal, and it'd be beneficial for everybody. I spent 10 years figuring that was not the case, but I just kept finding opportunities to kind of reinvent myself, and it was more, I guess curiosity is probably the theme throughout it all, like, okay, I want to see Iraq. I want to see Afghanistan. I've seen Fort Carson, Colorado. Now I want to go IO. I want to see what this world is about. And maybe that'll be the way of the future. And if I'm going to do that, well, then I hear all this crap about Korea. Like, let me go see what that's about. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So before the Army sends me there, let me go there on my terms. And I went to Korea, and that was an incredible experience because I thought that'll be the closest I can get to a deployment and do IO without being deployed. And it was somewhat accurate. And then my prize for going to Korea for a year was to go to JRTC, from the branch manager, because I was single. So
Yeah.
needs of the Army, the single guy on any side of the fence. It's like, oh yeah, well you can take one for the team. Like what else do you have going on, right? Like you're married to the Army.
Every time.
Um,
Yep. Every time.
and I've said it recently, at least on LinkedIn, right? Like I believe, if you join the military and you're not willing to be needs of the military for the majority, like then you're in the wrong career field. Like I get it. It's nice when you can choose and you have a family or there's other priorities in life, but the minute that like you really can't just take one for the team, like you need to get out.
I
So
agree
I
with
went
you
to
because our careers kind of mirrored each other. If my math is correct, you were in from 98 to 01 and then went to college. So I assume 4 years after that. So 05 would have been probably the first Iraq deployment for you, 05, 06.
Yeah, I had gotten a year of college done in Texas through Central Texas College. So I had 3 years left once I got
Yeah.
out. So '04 I commissioned, '05 I deployed.
Yeah. So we deployed for the first time together, actually, believe it or not. My first deployment was the tail end of '04 into the basically January of '06. So I was in Tikrit, Mosul, that whole area, driving from Kuwait up. And I agree with what you're saying. I really respect what you're saying because I got sold by the recruiter hook, line, and sinker. I like to travel. I have the travel bug. And at the time in 2002, when I joined, that was a real possibility. As an infantry guy, you knew you were going to go to Korea for a year-long hardship tour. That was standard for infantry guys when I joined. And you could almost guarantee that every 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years, you're going to be PCS to a completely different duty station. And that really appealed to me. Long story short, I got 3 deployments with the 3rd ID and never got out of there. I spent my first 9 years of my career there, and then I would spend my last half of my career at Fort Lewis, Washington, where I would get same thing you were doing. I've been to Iraq 3 times. I'm an infantry guy. I've got a CIB, EIB, no Ranger tab. Didn't have time to go do that. No, failed SFAS when I was a young private. I think it was due to age. It was a 21-day non-select, but now I got what's left? Afghanistan. I got to go to Afghanistan, right? And I get to Fort Lewis, and then here come orders for Afghanistan as I'm showing up, and I'm like, okay, well, it looks like we've nailed this. And then little did I know that one would be the one that ends my career. So I think our careers actually kind of mirrored each other's quite a bit because I went through between my second and third deployment with 3rd ID. I went through a stop move. I was actually supposed to go to Alaska. My brigade commander was actually my first battalion commander at 2-7 at 3rd ID, Colonel Todd Wood. Was reaching out to him, asking him if he would pull some strings and like get me. Like, I'm not trying to get out of anything.
Yeah,
Long
yeah,
story
right.
short, long story short, it's funny because when I did PCS up to Fort Lewis, the unit we replaced was Colonel Wood's brigade, and the unit that I would have been in the exact same place in Afghanistan that I ended up in with 123 out of Fort Lewis and 2nd ID, which is a wild story in itself. It's like the Army stopped me from going to send me back to Iraq because they thought I was trying to get out of a deployment. Yet, another year and a half later, I would be replacing the same unit I was supposed to PCS to on a deployment to Afghanistan.
Yeah. It's wild to think now, because I still struggle sometimes, when I see pictures of people that are O6s or general officers or whatever, and I always like check the sleeve, and I look at how did you only go like for ad deployment? Like, where you've been in the Army longer than me, or as long as I have. Like, where the hell were you?
Yeah.
Um, it's just, and now, I think I just saw, you can get a ribbon for going to the Mexican border.
What?
And it's like, yeah, that's a thing.
What?
That's you'll
Oh,
you'll have to look it up.
no.
It's a thing. So we got rid of the National Defense Service Medal a couple years ago, and so now there's it's a border campaign medal. I guess it's being floated. I don't know if it's approved, and then if you qualify for that, you can wear it in lieu of the whatever that everybody gets medal. But I only say all of that to just say like how times have changed. In the course of 20 years, where like that was the norm, and I know so many guys that saw the writing on the wall that did the back to back at Fort Drum, and they're like, the hell with this. Like I've watched people die. I've lost friends. Like my family is destroyed. Like all of the crap that they went through, and there was no end in sight at that time. And the people that endured, like it's just the army goes rolling along, and it's
Yep.
like
It's in the
they
song.
don't give a shit. Yeah. I mean, it's true. Anybody like they tell you how much they love you, but it's wild, that it just keeps happening, or it kept happening for about a decade or a little bit more, and now it's you kind of have this lull, and I think we get acclimated pretty quickly, and people are going to start getting annoyed. I have to go to NTC this year, and it's like, come on, suck it up.
It's funny because I look back at those NTC rotations, the JRTC rotations. And I hated them at the time. They were miserable. They're some of the most fun times of my life if I look back now.
Yeah, well, I would. Yeah, I like I said, I spent 2 years. I was supposed to, so I'll kind of pick up where I left off then. So coming out of Korea, branch manager again, single guy. Hey, I got a JRTC. Like, come on, what the really? Like, I've been to Fort Drum, Iraq, Afghanistan, Korea, and now you're going to send me to JRTC? Like, I'm single. Like, I don't want to be that way for the rest of my life. But come on, and he sold me on. Go figure. He was like, "Oh, it's a great place to network." So maybe that seed was planted a while ago. He's like, "Yeah, all the people that come through, and you'll see all the units and all of that." He was right about. And I recall, I wish I could find the email or would have saved it, but it was like, "Yeah, we'll do 2 years. Like, we'll get you in and out." And then,
Uh-huh.
like the 18, 20 month mark, we kind of had a conversation. He was like, "Hey, what? Yeah." I was like, "It's 2 years." He's like, So yeah, I did 25 rotations as an OC at JRTC, and it was grueling. Like, I mean, it was by far and away outside of deployment. Like you said, the best assignment I could have ever asked for to learn about myself, the profession, the other units. Watching units. And I met my wife, ironically enough, she was in Houston, so I met her there. The people, I can't say enough good things about like the role players, especially, because they're basically local to the area, Leesville and surrounding parts. Some drive, I think, probably 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
They don't get paid a whole lot, and they're out there, in the heat and the humidity, dealing with grumpy soldiers and people that don't want to be there any more than they do. And God bless them, man. And while I'm thinking about Louisiana, I just thought like my first deployment when we went over, it was my first real experience of like true humility. We were replacing the Louisiana National Guard in Baghdad. And they didn't have the easiest go because they were there '04 to '05, as IEDs are emerging and the trucks and the armor hadn't caught up with the threat yet. And as we're coming in, Katrina hit Louisiana. And like there were no shit, there were guys in the command post, right? Like watching on the big screen TV, where you'd watch like the battle cam or whatever, but now it's watching the news and they're like, "Oh, that's my city. Like, oh, that's my street. Like, that was my house."
Yeah.
And like they had just spent a year over there, and then we're going back to absolutely nothing. Like, and it was just you feel bad for yourself going over there, and you're like, "Oh, this sucks." Like, we've got a whole year, and then you're like, "Shit." So anyway, so yeah, Louisiana. I guess I've got to kind of tie to them between that first deployment and then Fort Polk and JRTC. But that was an incredible experience. That met my wife, and then we got back to Fort Carson, which is not where I wanted to go because I'd already been there, right? And like
Yeah.
you, if I'm going to stay in, like I want to see something different.
Yep.
And I think probably about that point, because I went IO with a thought of like I don't necessarily need to be a battalion commander. I don't need to do all the KD expected jobs because I look at those guys and I'm like, most of them hate their lives, right? They're just doing it to chase the next thing that they think they want. That somebody's
Yeah.
told them they should be like, hey, you need to be a commander. If you're going to be in the military, you're a leader. You need to be a commander. And this kind of touches on the leader versus follower, right? Like we're never taught like anything about followership. Um,
Yeah.
so I watched all these people go in this way, and I'm like, it sucks. But then lo and behold, when I got to Carson the second time with my wife and found out she was pregnant with our daughter, we were supposed to go back to Afghanistan. I was like, fuck. So now we're looking at 4 deployments, and I jumped on and I was IO. Like, this is not going to be a fun deployment if I'm IO. But they were looking for everything I didn't want to be, Battalion XO, for HHBN, so the headquarters battalion, HHC, which is that's an experience in itself. We could do a whole podcast on that.
I can only
You know,
imagine.
yeah. So at that, like, I was still like I had done pretty well at JRTC, so I was confident about maybe getting promoted to lieutenant colonel. I was back at Carson. I was like, okay, well, there's definitely worse places to go to be, but Afghanistan don't necessarily want to go back there again with a family. So I jumped on the XO thing, thinking, well, if I'm going to go, I might as well kind of at least be in the know and be part of the planning so that I'm not just waiting. I'm just another staff officer at division trying to figure out why we're doing what we're doing. Instead, I could be, kind of at the tip. Um, but I mean, and I didn't end up going because there was a bunch of different things going on. I kind of just stood rear D for a while. But that's where things really started to turn. I had an hour commute that didn't help probably, but that's when I found myself in the Army doing what I never wanted to do
Yeah.
for the wrong, and then and then it was like, for what reason am I doing this? And I had my family and I had the promotion, looming. It was like, okay, well, if I do well enough, but I always knew at that point with 3 years prior service, like I could get to 20 and I could retire as an '04 and be fine, right? Like I still get the pension and then pride, so I started to notice a lot of different things there. Pride and just, it wasn't where I wanted to be, like physically, professionally, personally. I was good, right? I had a wife, have a wife, same wife, starting to have a family. But everything else was just like, this is miserable. And that's where I started listening to, um, I mean, I'd always heard of Dave Ramsey, but Dave Ramsey and Ken Coleman specifically, who talks about the proximity principle. I think some would call it laws of attraction. I say now we become the company we keep, and talking to people about, hey, what would you do if money were no object? What are you good at? What do people like? And not just what do you think you're good at? Like, what do people tell you you're good at?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of gets you energized? And if money were no object, and that kind of planted the seed, like, okay, I want to stay connected to the military. I want to help people. Um, I just didn't know exactly how. Mental health counseling was fresh on my mind because with the deployment, we had a couple suicides, or what do they call them now, unalived events. in the formation that we had to address, I think, one was while I was on rear D. So, you kind of bring the whole formation together. The things that, could come, but you never expect, like you'll have to be the guy or gal to stand in front of the formation and talk about. Um, and I looked at the support that we had available, and it's like, I don't want to go talk to them. Like I could talk, God bless the chaplains. They're pretty good, and they get it more than some of the Mifflicks and the other help that we had. And I was just like, well, I can definitely, kind of like the enlisted to officer route. Like I can definitely do better than that person right there.
Right.
So maybe that's where I'll go. But we had one more. Well, then COVID started coming, but I knew we had one more assignment because I at least wanted to see if I was going to make '05. Um, and that is that I will admit, I won't name his name, but I had a buddy who was the branch manager, that was able to kind of help me get my number one choice, which was Tampa here in McDill. And then once we got here, my wife had a palm tree in the backyard, and she was like, "Here's good." And I was like, "Yeah, but maybe I'll find that fire again." Because I wasn't done with the army, but I recognized something had to change, with me personally. And, I thought getting here, it was a cyber unit, it was CENTCOM, so it was tying all my deployments together. I was like, now I'm there, right? I'm at the headquarters that now I can see what it's all about. And it was like a total letdown,
Was it?
to realize, oh, absolutely. For me, but I was in '05, so they're a dime a dozen, even '06s, at a 4-star command. Um, but watching the operations, because that's when we left Afghanistan. So being part of that and recognizing like, oh, like okay, yeah, it's field grade officers doing a lot of the legwork. Like it's not these masterful like warmongers that are, hey, look, let me pull out my map kit and I'm gonna wow you. It's like the just the random '04 who just got back from ILE or somebody, and they're like, okay, hey, MDMP step one. And you're like, which made me really enjoy my time at JRTC and get more annoyed at like, hey, if people would pay more attention, they're like, this never goes away, no matter what echelon you're at. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I think once we shut down Afghanistan and I realized that was kind of the real turning point. Then we had our son here. It was like, I know where the Army could send us, and I know '06 is on the horizon, but I didn't want to be that guy that was like, well, I'm just gonna wait to see if I make '06, and I'll keep my name in the hat, and if it doesn't, I'm gonna pull it, and then someone else is gonna get screwed. It was like, you know what, like you didn't fire me, I quit kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Um, and then I kind of
I'm I'm
decided, go ahead.
I'm curious. Do you think your decision to hang it up was affected at all by kind of the drawdown in Afghanistan, the colossal failure that was, but just from the element of, I mean, dude, we're rare. We're really rare breeds in the conventional forces. I've got 4 deployments. You have 3 deployments. A big part of that for me, and why I kind of don't hang on to the fact that I never got to finish my whole career. I got medically retired at 13 because I saw the writing on the wall after we came home from Afghanistan. And I was like, I am not going to be an effective garrison non-commissioned officer. It's just not. It is. I mean, there's so much that I had missed out on. It. I went to all the schools. I went to BNOC, ANOC, PODC, all that good stuff, right? Like I had the leadership schools, but we didn't, like, everything was changing so fast. And it's like, you're asking me to do stuff at a level in garrison that nobody's ever had me do ever. And I was just like, I fucking hate this shit. I don't want anything to do with this. I want to train. I want to go to war. That's what I know. I guess the greater question in that is that a big reason you think why you decided it was time to go and not chase '06?
So I'll say 2 things. One, harping on JRTC, but just the deployment in the op tempo, one of the things I learned at JRTC, or at least I heard, I didn't fully learn it until it was me going through it personally here, more than Carson. But at JRTC, like you didn't have a lot of soldiers, right? It was a lot of senior NCOs, mid-level officers, and I remember forgot who it was or exactly what it was, but somebody highlighted like, hey, look, this is where people can get themselves in trouble. Because I had already been to Korea, right? And I was like, oh, people get themselves in trouble in Korea, but it was a different trouble. They're chasing, soju and
Mm-hmm.
who knows what.
Drinky girls and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Drinking girls.
yeah.
You hope they're girls. Um,
Yeah, I'm
you
well
know,
aware. I've got a lot of buddies that spend a lot of time in Korea.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's everybody because I used to sit out there at 2 o'clock in the morning as courtesy patrol and watch the first sergeants and sergeants major and younger officers, usually not the older ones. They were married and in Seoul anyway. But what I learned at JRTC was like that's where people face their own demons because they don't have soldiers to distract themselves, right? Like they're not dealing with other people's problems. They can only deal with their own problems. So that there is something to be said for that. I think whether it's JRTC or just when you're back in garrison and the op tempo slows down and I think it was probably two parts, right? Like it was the drawdown and watching how not magical that was and how much of a field grade operation it became, right? It wasn't. I mean, there were some 4 stars or general officers, right? And they're making the decisions, but I mean, it was a lot of '06 to '04, '04 to '06 with some senior NCOs and warrant officers, like just nugging it out, burning the midnight oil to make the best of that. Um, and I'm not against deploying, but that's when it kind of goes to the needs of the army. Like, okay, well, if China's the next thing, or if Ukraine, I had been to Poland for 6 months when we got back to Carson. So I'd seen Europe a little bit, and I think it was a culmination of if I'm not going to move for the army,
Hmm.
or I'm not willing to be needs of the army for moving, and I believe that I should be willing to deploy wherever, but I'm not really feeling like I need to deploy anymore, nor do I want to leave my family. Like I think it was probably a variety of those factors coming together to just go like, yeah, I'm not like I'm not GI Joe, right? Like I'm not. I don't have any fancy tabs, um, you know. But I believe if you're going to serve and you deploy, that's what you signed up to do. And Garrison, I did not love,
I
like
did,
you.
yeah,
They're like,
I
oh, we're
did
gonna
not
get.
love it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was battery commander, and it was after deployments, and they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna get back to the artillery basics. Like what? Nobody knows the artillery basics. Like this whole battery has just known deployments, and artillery became infantry. I use that term loosely, but they weren't doing artillery. Infantry, MPs, whatever you want to call it, running patrols. Working on
Route
towers.
clearance, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
route clearance.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, they're doing totally unconventional stuff. So they're like, oh, we're gonna like, hey, look, sir or sergeant major, like, yeah, you did that crap 20 years ago, and you remember it, and those are the good old days for you, but like we need to find where the compromise is between what you want to achieve, what they've experienced, and how much time we have to do this, and what is the right answer.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, once I got here, all of myself caught up to me, right? Like all the shit that I was carrying at JRTC, or not JRTC, but now at Carson, and having a family, and that's when I think the op tempo, when we showed up too, there was COVID, so we were literally like week on, week off schedule.
I can't imagine being in the military during COVID. I don't even want to think about that. I've heard so many just terrible stories about how that went.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was from one extreme to the other because at Carson, as I was the battalion S3 on the way out the door, and half of my time, probably most of my time, was scheduling PT.
Hmm.
How was everybody going to do PT in the same gym on the same facility over the course of a week? And it was Excel spreadsheet. Okay, and the rules would change, right? Like, okay, well, we can have 10 people now. We can have 12 people now. We can have 16 people. And then, oh, it's going to snow today. So it was micromanaging everything to make sure that we could still be soldiers and stay in shape and get the job done, whatever that was. And then we came here, and 4-star headquarters, PT on your own, regardless, pretty much.
Right,
Um,
right. Well, for those that are listening, I know you're waiting to hear David's transition story, and we've waited so long because he's actually going through the transition right now. You're what, 3, 4 months into this right now?
yeah, 2.5.
There
So
we go.
June 1st, I guess, was my first civilian day.
So let's talk about your transition, man. How is that going? I already know, but they don't know. And what did you do to prepare yourself, and how did you actually find the reality of stepping out of the uniform and coming back into civilian life after, I guess we'll just chalk it up to 24 total years?
Yeah. I mean, so I think the conclusion I've drawn most recently is it's more challenging but more familiar than I would have ever expected. And I don't think I approached transition lightly. I mean, I was thinking about it at Fort Carson as I was driving home at 8 o'clock at night, hating my life, and listening to Ken Coleman and thinking, "Hey, I'm going to be a social worker and I'm going to come back and I'm going to help people." Um, but 2 years ago, yeah, probably 2 years ago when the Army opened up the 2 year retirement window that you could actually submit, that's when I got serious. Um, and I was all in then on financial planning, and we could save that story. But the short version of why I transitioned was, um, the way I sum it up now is I've done a lot better with my own finances than my own mental health, and I figured there's a lot of parallels that I can address in financial planning, saving lives, saving marriages, helping people avoid these toxic relationships, personally and professionally, through financial wellness compared to mental wellness. So I got a college degree or another degree in financial planning. I was networking my ass off, on LinkedIn, trying to meet people in the business. I was interviewing, in what I would consider them informational interviews. So not, I was so far out. It was, and that's what I would advise to anybody. Like, you're never too early to start looking. And if you don't, the best time to look for a job is when you don't need a job, because it doesn't matter. Like, you can step on it, you can misuse, you can say fuck in an interview, and someone's like, "What'd you just say?" Like, "Hey, you're out." Like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll go back down to the line." Like, "My bad." Like, you can experiment with that, and maybe it'll wait. You might think you're wasting other people's time, but if they're willing to give you the chance, you never know. So don't take advantage of those opportunities. And I did to an extent, and I thought I was pretty well aware of, like, okay, I was with a whole bunch of civilians that had gone from the Army straight back into civilian world, and I knew that wasn't for me because I was like, well, that's cheating, right? Like, that's too easy. And I don't want to knock any of them because some of them truly love the military and being able to serve. Um, but if you're thinking about jumping or a total pivot in the civilian world, it's worth putting pen to paper and figuring out what you want to do, how you want to do it, and networking accordingly. Because I think I did it pretty well, and I'm surprised on a daily basis by things. I was like, oh shit, like I probably could have thought about that. Like little systems at work. How does the organization that I'm going to join operate? Okay, so they've told me this many days off and this is my salary. Like, okay, that makes sense. But on a day to day, like, okay, I've got to dress myself. What is my day to day routine? Who am I talking to? How do I structure my own calendar? A lot of those things have been a steep learning curve. Not because I didn't know it, just because I didn't expect to have to relearn it necessarily.
Well, and I like how you phrase this. You used to joke about struggling to remember names and dress yourself after leaving the Army, but you said the real challenge was believing in your decision to completely change careers and still provide for your family. I think that's so important to touch on because, as you well know, I preach this all the time. You have to figure out who you are and what aligns with you, but understanding that you can take a risk on yourself in a complete. I mean, look at me, dude. Like, from infantry to AI, right? Like, from infantry to advocacy, right? The complete opposite. Taking life to trying to save lives, right? You can pivot and find joy and be able to provide in anything that you do as long as you believe in yourself. And I think you're a walking example of that.
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, and I think doubt doubt will be with you every step of the way. And I think that's, whether you're transitioning out of the military or not, and into the civilian world. But I see it, with civilians, right? Like, there's plenty of people that were corporate and have jumped into the entrepreneur world, or hey, I was a salesperson and now I'm going into an office all day, and the theme is you have to trust in yourself. I believe in God. I go to church. I think it helps, if you have a belief in something more, especially when you're at the lowest lows, to go like, okay, here, I feel like I'm alone, but I know I'm not. Um, so it can be challenging, and there's a lot of roadmaps out there that show, like, the here's what you should do at 24 months, and if you should do it 18 months and 12 months. But what's not in there, and it can't really be accounted for. As I've tried to tell people, everybody says I miss the people and I miss the purpose when I get out. And you don't have to miss either one of them if you're truly disciplined, right? Because especially now, like we have phones, we have social media, computer, like you can get in touch with anybody in a matter of minutes. So if
Yeah.
you miss people, it's because you failed to keep in touch with them.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, prime example this weekend, yesterday, right? This weekend, I made a post last week. I'm going to be in Clearwater for the weekend for this event. Anybody who lives in Clearwater, I'd love to meet you from my network. Just grab a coffee and shoot the shit, right? Like, I think we underestimate how powerful that actually is. And I'll say this on this show, you're the only one that actually reached out. It was days afterwards. I was already on my way back home. And I get it, the algorithm shows people to post, at different times or whatever. So I'm not faulting those people. But of the people who saw it, you were the only one that reached out and said, hey, what's the plan? I want to try and make this happen. And I'm like, hell yeah. Because look, I have a lot of respect for you because the way we actually met is you actually commented on one of my posts, probably talking shit about the transition. And then you DM'd me and we had a conversation back and forth. And look, man, it's really humbling when 05 that's still active duty, getting ready to transition, is reaching out to me and saying, hey man, you're on to something. I resonate with what you're saying. Like, so I have a really deep respect for you for reaching out. And so of course I was excited when I'm like, man, this guy is going to take his Sunday. He's going to, clear it with household 6 and try and make this happen. Like, man, that's such an awesome feeling. And then yesterday, right? Like, Roger and Katie Palat, I've been talking with Roger for a while, since I've really first started posting about plant medicine, my journey with that. He's a Reiki master. I also really, enjoy, kind of the alternative medicine stuff and kind of the energy work and all of that. I really, I don't care what people think of me for that. You want to think I'm weird or cuckoo, fine. I know that this stuff is actually powerful. It has a lot of merit, and I think people should open their mind to it. But it was like, they live in Orlando. I live on the coast. It's like, man, we need to just meet up. And so I cleared my calendar and drove over and spent 3 hours yesterday having, coffee and pizza and just talking and no agenda whatsoever, but just genuine connection with people. And I can't tell you how much, even though I've figured a lot of this stuff out through transition, it took me way longer than it does most people. It still fills my cup up. I still learn something every single time. It's like, man, I should do more of this. I should double down on this. And it's like, this is what I want to be doing. So I agree with what you're saying, man. It's connection to people, which I think through building real, genuine connection with strangers, you do find purpose again.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable through the transition, and I think we think, and I've had these conversations with my wife, and she still doesn't understand. Like, well, why do you have to go meet some random stranger on a Sunday? Like, that's weird. Like, okay, like whatever. I drive home to New York, and I try to see every single friend, despite the fact that not a single one of them has come down to Florida to see me. It's like, why do you waste your time? It's like, I don't, it makes sense in my brain. I can't articulate it. But being uncomfortable, like, it's different than when you're in the military. Like we've all slept under the stars. We've all been colder than we wanted to be. We've all been hotter than expected. Maybe not everybody's had to deal with indirect or deployments or, some of the other crap that goes along with it, but it's different. I think when you're in uniform, I don't know about you, but when I was downrange, I was in an armored truck. And when I got out of the armored truck, like I had a whole bunch of kit and I had a whole bunch of ammo and I had a radio that I could talk to Apaches or C-130s, and it's, and you're prepared, you're trained for that. There's no, I'll keep with the theme of JRTC. There's no CTC for transition.
No.
Like we call it TAP, I guess, and I think if TAP weren't broken, you wouldn't be as popular as you are. You wouldn't have this calling that you do. But there's a lot of stuff that can be very uncomfortable talking to strangers, knowing what to say, overthinking what you're going to say. Not until recently, as I transitioned into the financial planning space, like I wanted to be all things to everybody. And I'm only, 5 months in. It's like, well, this doesn't work.
No,
Like you actually have to figure out who is your, people say niche, or, okay, I'm
Target
a veteran.
market, or yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I've been Army for 27 years. Like, I think I could probably talk to veterans, and then I think about, like, well, what was it about mental health counseling and what drove me here? Like, and now when I get up and I talk to people, or when I DM people now on LinkedIn or anywhere else, it's like, I believe financial wellness can save lives and prevent divorce.
I know it
And
can.
I think,
I I
yeah,
know that it
right. Like,
can. Yeah.
but I
It's
felt
it,
awkward saying that, because it's like, that seems like an extreme statement, and some people are like, whoa, but now I say it, and you'll get one or two people that you lock eyes with, and be like, yeah, you're like, I'm divorced because of finances, or, you can see it on the news. So and so CEO killed himself. It's like, what does that person have to worry about finance? Like, they don't, something's wrong there, So I think they go hand in hand: financial wellness, mental health, and I think it's through that experience and being uncomfortable, going, what, I'm just going to be me. Take it
yeah.
or leave it, because in the military, like, yeah, you can be you, and you can probably get away with a lot of shit, sense of humor, jackassery that is tolerated in the military, that is not tolerated in the civilian world, and probably rightfully so. Work hard, play hard, when in uniform, and that of course translates to a certain extent in the civilian world. I don't want to discourage anybody and say it's just all prim and proper, but there's a difference, and I think you have to find out who you really are, um, and be uncomfortable. You're probably going to be very uncomfortable in that process,
Well, and
reinventing
to
yourself.
your point, man, getting into the mental health space, the financial planning space, for the reasons that you're doing it, and then leveraging the fact that you're 27 years Army, like, that's an immediate base of power with your market. You automatically bring something to the table that people like with what I do, just in the advocacy side in this podcast. People are just drawn to me because I'm saying quiet parts out loud, all the things they're thinking and feeling. So in your financial planning background and your mental health background, with the things that you're trying to do for the veteran community, because you are one of those, there's this immediate trust, and like, I can trust this dude. I can tell him things that I'm not comfortable telling other people, because he gets it. I mean, with the finances piece, right? Like, there's probably going to be a day where I come to you and we sit down and, like, David, I need your help with this, because from 17 to 30 years old, I was spending money like crazy. Nobody was ever teaching me anything, because I didn't know if I was coming home from a deployment, right? And then from 30 on, I've been building this business, so money hasn't really been coming in. So it's literally a paycheck to paycheck situation, which obviously isn't ideal. There are things, yes, I'm still able to put a little bit of money away, but as I continue to grow in entrepreneurship and bring in more money than I could have ever imagined, and I mean that. We're not going to talk about details right now, but, like, I know I'm not equipped to handle that, and I could end up one of those CEOs who's offing himself because he's got financial problems, when you wouldn't think that he has financial problems with the money that he's bringing in. And the reason I would come to you is because we've built this relationship at this point, but I also know you're not going to sit here and judge me because I'm 40 years old and I haven't figured out how finances work or how to manage this massive amount of money, because you understand my background and my past, and there's zero judgment there. Whereas if I go to that civilian financial planner, he's going to tell me how fucked up I've been for my whole life, and then I'm in a big hole, and I'm not going to be able to dig myself out, and I'm going to have to make compromises here and there that I'm not necessarily willing to make at 40 years old, while I want to try and enjoy some of my life. You know what I mean? And I really appreciate that you found a space like this, because I'm of the same opinion that you are. The financial piece is a big driver of all of the mental health stuff. Look, it's not a secret. Money makes the world go round. You literally can't do anything without money. You just can't. It's unfortunate. You can change your relationship with money and how you view it and all of that. You see it as a tool, not as the be all end all. There's a lot of things that you can do that change it. But the fact remains, without ones and zeros in your freaking bank account, like, you're not doing much in life.
Yeah, yeah, and it's it's gotten harder and harder. And what's fascinating though is, to kind of just keep with the theme of, the military history and our background. Deployments, like, you go to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and yeah, of course, some people want you dead. They want to shoot you in the face as soon as they see you. But there are other people living, in mud huts with no shoes. And you show up, and they'll offer you whatever they have. And it brings them joy. So I think sometimes, we have so much that we don't appreciate what we have, and I wish there was a way to find a balance. Like, okay, I mean, I live in South Tampa now, and it's like, there's kids half my age that have a $300,000 Porsche. Like, what the
Yep.
hell? And,
Yeah.
and they're never going to be happy. They're already thinking about what is their next car, and then you go across, and it doesn't even have to be Iraq or Afghanistan. There's other countries where people don't have as much, but there's so much more willing to give and share. So I appreciate that you said, yeah, you want to have money, but it shouldn't. The other saying I heard recently was, "Don't let your possessions possess you."
Exactly.
So just
Yeah.
have it, be happy, and where my ultimate goal, is to help anybody in need, and that's part of the challenge with the industry is there's a lot of people, and companies that you have to have a base of money in order to get in the door, and I don't ever want that to be the case. I want to be able to help everybody, and I don't want to be able to help the rich get richer necessarily, but I would like to help the rich figure out how they can leave a legacy, not just for themselves and their families, but those around them, right? Like there's homeless people all over the place in South Tampa, and I know at Fort Carson and throughout this country, so to try to plant those seeds with people who are blessed with finances, that more money than they'll ever know what to do with, to try to influence, like, hey, have you heard of, fill in the blank nonprofit focused on military veterans? Like maybe you should look into that, and that's where I'm hoping I'm able to take it, 5, 10 years down the road. And I will say, not everybody automatically trusts you because you have the shared background, because I also reckon, there's still a stigma, right? Like the '06s and above, I'm still in '05, and I'm not saying that it's not a blanket statement, but there's certain obstacles you still have to get over. It's like some people carry their rank into retirement,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
or,
We've seen it
hey,
a
I'm,
million times.
yeah. Or, and maybe for others, not you, of course, but, how many people say like, oh, officers, I'm not going to ever go officer because I want to work for a living, so there's still that stigma like, oh, you're just another officer. Like, I don't trust you because you're an officer, so I'm hoping to break down some of those stigmas too and go like, hey, look, I've watched people not invest in thrift savings. I've also watched what my own balance has done. Like I've had the $300 paycheck and I've had the, I don't know, whatever they've gotten up to, maybe it was 13,000 with housing allowance, right? Like
Right.
people that officers, especially as you get to the 20-year mark, '05s and '06s, I mean, they're making close to $200,000, with housing allowance, of course. And of course, there's families and, it's not as much as it used to be, but it's a shame for people to think, oh, I'm in the military, I'll never be rich or I'll never have wealth.
Dude, it's a far cry from our private days as paychecks, monthly paychecks. I think my first one was like $770 or something like that as an E1. Now, mind you, times were much different in '03. There was still pay phones on the wall of the barracks. Not everybody was required to have a cell phone, so you had less bills. But like that's a far cry from when I got out, and my monthly paycheck's well over $5,000. It's like, what the hell is going on here?
And so many people, and that's usually what stops people from investing. It's like, oh, well, I'm still not making enough. I don't have enough to invest. And what I can say, because of course, what I've learned about the financial world is, it's very much like the military and all the rules and regulations and what you can say, what you cannot say. So, without stepping on it, sooner is better when
Yeah.
it comes to investing, right? Like the
Yeah.
sooner you can invest, the more you can invest, the better off you're going to be because the power of compounding, which is probably not even taught in school anymore,
It's
is
not.
the most powerful tool we have when it comes to investing. I could probably think biblically, like respecting money is probably a more powerful tool, but when it comes to accumulating and growing wealth, yeah, that if you
Compound
could just
interest
start
is
to
it.
put it away.
Yeah. David, brother, tell everybody how they can reach out to you if they're interested in your service with financial planning, or if because they, like me, think you're a really cool guy and fun to talk to and just want some advice, life advice, whatever. How can they get a hold of you? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I'm on LinkedIn. In the Army, I was the only David Zallo in global. I don't think I'm the only David Zallo on LinkedIn, but you see the spelling DAVID ZALLO. You can always reach out. It would help if you have a message so I know who you are. Kind of start the conversation for any sort of transition advice. you can call my cell phone, 914-536-8355. Day or night, my wife hates it. She'll yell at me. Easier with a text, just because if I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I can't sleep, I can respond to a text and gladly follow up with a phone call. And if it's financial, just to keep it all above board, the easiest thing is just professional email. It's david@sfgtampa.com. And if you're anti-phone or texting, I'll even give my Gmail for transition questions or just icebreakers. DJ Zallo at Gmail. And that's not to be cool. My middle name is John. So D for David, J for John. Spell out the last name at Gmail. And if you could put something creative in the title so it doesn't go to spam, follow up with a text. It's the best way.
Brother, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for having this conversation with me. I think people will get a lot out of this, particularly, seeing a higher level officer in the transition right now, talking about these things and what you're doing on the other side of it and your desire to help. So super grateful you were here today, man. And super grateful for you coming to Coffee Sunday. Man, really cool to know you, man. We're just really grateful to know you.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad we finally got the chance to meet and talk, and look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you David Zallo. Please reach out to him with all your financial questions, or if you don't trust me enough to handle your transition and want a different perspective, I promise the guy won't steer you wrong. Please like, rate, review, subscribe, and download this. Help us get it in front of everybody who needs to see it. And until next week, we'll see you later, guys. Take care. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.